You just pulled a blanket up over your legs without even thinking about it. Your thermostat clicked on somewhere in the wall. You didn't calculate anything, didn't panic, didn't wonder if tonight was the night the cold finally won. But 30,000 years ago, a 7-year-old child in what is now Russia went to sleep every winter knowing that question was real. No thermostat, no walls, really. Just fire, fur, and the people around them standing between a small body and a cold that regularly killed. You survived tonight because thousands of children before you all already solved this problem, over and over, in conditions that should have made it impossible. And the way they did it is not what you think. Here's the thing nobody tells you. The popular story of the Ice Age is about mammoth hunters, spears, and tough adult men gritting their teeth through the cold. But the real story is that children were not passengers in that survival. They were active participants in some of the most sophisticated cold weather technology our species ever built. Their bodies and bones are the actual evidence that this technology worked. Understanding how prehistoric kids survived the deadliest winters in human history will change how you think about childhood itself. Because childhood, as a protected, slow, cared-for stage of life, might be one of the coldest forged inventions we have. To understand how this happened, you have to imagine a landscape that barely resembles anything you've stood in. Picture Northern Europe around 34,000 years ago. The air is dry and sharp enough to hurt your lungs on the inhale. Wind moves across open steppe with nothing to break it for miles. It carries the smell of ash from a fire that has to stay lit no matter what. At night, you'd hear wolves. You'd also hear the low creak of frozen ground shifting under its own weight, a sound with no obvious source, the kind that would keep you awake. Winter temperatures here regularly dropped far below anything most modern humans have ever felt directly on skin, cold enough that exposed skin could suffer damage within minutes. In 2018, Eric Trinkhaus, a professor of anthropology at Washington University in St. Louis, published a detailed study on a burial site called Sunghir, near what is now Vladimir, Russia. His team found the graves of 2 children, roughly 10 and 12 years old, buried head to head. Between them, they were covered in nearly 10,000 mammoth ivory beads. That's more ornamentation than the adult male buried nearby. Here's why that matters. These were not children who survived on the margins of their group. In death, at least, they were treated as some of the most important individuals this community had. This sounds impossible, but scientists have actually documented, through direct physical evidence, what these children's bodies went through. Trinkhaus and his colleagues examined the boys' skeletons. Their thigh bones were unusually short and bowed, consistent with serious physical stress during growth, yet wear patterns show they stayed active despite it. Childhood in the Ice Age was not a protected bubble. It was a trial by fire, sometimes literally, that shaped bodies before they were finished growing. They didn't get to opt out of the cold to let their bones heal properly. Survival was not something that happened to prehistoric children. It was something they had to physically build inside their own skeletons, whether their bodies were ready or not. But here's where it gets extraordinary. Look at the beadwork again, because the number hides something brutal. Each of those 10,000 beads had to be individually carved and hand-drilled from ivory using stone tools, a process experienced crafters estimate takes somewhere close to half an hour per bead. Do the math and you land on roughly 5,000 hours of skilled human labor, poured into the clothing of 2 children who were already dead, in the exact season when every spare hour should have gone toward hunting, firewood, and simply staying alive. Let that sink in. This community spent more combined labor honoring 2 dead children than most modern families spend building an entire house. But this raises a question that's been debated for decades. Why would a group starving for daylight and calories divert that much time away from pure survival? You are standing at the mouth of a cave in what is now southern France. The air changes the moment you step inside, colder and heavier, pressing against your skin. A small clay lamp burning animal fat throws orange light across limestone somewhere ahead. Smoke mixes with something mineral and damp that never quite leaves the tunnels. Your hand, small, maybe 4 or 5 years old in this scene, is pressed flat against cold stone, while an adult holds you steady on their shoulders in the dark. Water drips somewhere you can't see. Your own breath sounds loud in a silence that swallows everything else. This is what Ice Age communities did with their children, not occasionally. Every single day, in some version, they carried their smallest members into the heart of their world, cold caves included, and made them part of it. Around 26,000 years ago, at a site called Dolní Věstonice in what is now the Czech Republic, archaeologists found an infant burial that mirrors this same pattern of intense, deliberate care in brutally cold conditions. Thousands of kilometers away in Siberia, at a site called Malta, similar patterns show up completely independently, elaborate grave goods surrounding buried children, in a population that had no contact with the people of Sunghir. Here's the part most documentaries skip entirely. This wasn't isolated behavior from one unusually sentimental group. It kept showing up over and over in populations that never met, never traded, and never shared a single idea between them. Deep inside painted caves like Rufinjak, researcher Genevieve von Petzinger has cataloged handprints and finger markings made by children as young as 2 or 3, some pressed high on ceilings only reachable if an adult lifted them there in the freezing dark. This wasn't primitive instinct. This was closer to an insurance system, the same way a modern city engineers water infrastructure around the threat of drought, except the infrastructure here was made entirely of people. Kristen Hawkes, an anthropologist at the University of Utah, has a simpler way to put it. Human childhood got long because someone else had to pay for it, not metaphorically. In hard-won calories, in sleepless hours, in adults who could have spent that energy keeping themselves alive instead. That closes the loop this video opened. Prehistoric children didn't survive the deadliest winters in human history by being tough enough to make it alone. They survived because entire communities decided, out loud or not, that keeping a child alive mattered as much as keeping the fire alive. Today, we've mostly automated that cost away. Your home holds a stable 70 degrees regardless of what's happening outside your window. Your child doesn't need 3 adults awake in shifts, feeding a fire through a night that could otherwise kill them by morning. We traded a childhood built on visible, constant, communal effort for a childhood built on infrastructure most of us never think about twice. And most of us never even knew it was gone, because the exchange happened so slowly and so completely that it stopped looking like an exchange at all. It just looks like normal life. In that same Sunghir grave, buried between the 2 boys, archaeologists found a mammoth ivory spear, nearly 2.5 meters long, carved from a single tusk straightened using heat and pressure, a process that would have taken enormous skill and time. It was placed there for children who never grew old enough to use a full-sized weapon like that. Think about that for a second. Somebody in that community spent what may have been weeks shaping a tool their child would never use in life, and gave it to them anyway, in the depths of an Ice Age winter that had already taken so much. That is not the record of a species just barely holding on against the cold. That is the record of people who loved specific, named children enough to give them the finest thing they could make, even when it served no practical purpose at all. You pulled that blanket over your legs a few minutes ago without a second thought, in a room that would have seemed like paradise to a child at Sunghir. But now you know what that same gesture used to cost. Somewhere under a blanket tonight, in a warm room on a planet that no longer regularly tries to kill its children through winter, alone, a kid is falling asleep safe because 30,000 winters of children before them didn't just survive the cold. They were carried through it, on purpose, by people determined not to let them go. That started long before you were born. Tonight, in your own quiet way, you're still doing it.